Hello and welcome to a live Deprogram with Keri Smith. I am your host, Keri. Today is Monday, October 27th. It's a big day for me because today is the 6th anniversary of my sobriety. Praise God. I was just talking about this with my husband. I can't believe it's been 6 years. It'll be 6 years for him in about a week. We got sober around the same time, and we got sober together. And just I can't tell you how many blessings have come after that blessing. So I'm here to say to you, first of all, if you are a person who's struggling with some kind of addiction, some kind of crutch or vice that you feel like you are becoming a slave to that thing, that you are serving that thing instead of that thing serving you, you can. If I can get out of it, you can get out of it. Like, I'm a person who struggled for over 10 years to quit drinking, and I never thought I would see 6 years of sobriety. So praise the God, praise God, thank the Lord. All of it, like, all praise to him. I wrote an essay about it on the first anniversary, and it was called Sacrificing a Demon. You can find it on my Substack. And it's funny because I just reread that to see what I was thinking on the 1 year anniversary of sobriety, and it's even better now. So I'm thinking of writing something more about it now. But it's amazing to look back and see that even on that first year, I was talking about how much things had improved. And one of the things I mentioned in that essay was Jordan Peterson. Everybody knows who Jordan Peterson is now, right? Jordan Peterson, who I had heard a lecture of his a couple years maybe before I quit drinking, where he talked about how everybody has one thing you can identify that you think, if I took this thing out of my life, my life might be better. And everybody has something that comes to mind when you say that. And for one person, it might be gambling, or another person, it might be drinking, or another person, it might be a bad relationship they're in, or a bad job, or it might be porn, or it might be something, something that you need, that you probably would be better if you gave that thing up, if you sacrificed it, right? And for me, when I heard that lecture, the first thing that came to mind was drinking, and it stuck with me. And in that lecture, he talked about, why not try giving that thing up for 1 year and see where you are in a year, evaluate how your life is. Is it better? And if it's better, why not try giving it up for 5 years? And in 5 years, evaluate and see where you're at. And is your life better as a result of giving that thing up? And if it's better, why not try for 10 years? And I love that approach. Everybody, different things are going to help different people, but that helped me for sure, because it was almost too much for me to consider stopping drinking forever. At that point, it was just too much for me to say that. And I've talked with other people who, this is a better approach for them, for some people. So think about that. If you're a person who's like, I can't imagine, I'm so attached to this thing, this vice, this crutch, this thing that I'm a slave to, I can't imagine never doing it again. Like, if you get panicked, if you're physically dependent on it or whatever, instead of you're thinking about it like forever, think about it like a year. Commit to a year. Can you do a year and see where you're at? And I'll tell you, my husband and I both said we're going to quit for a year. We're going to see where we're at. And in our case, just within the first 2 months, we were like, this is great. I can't imagine getting to the end of the year and saying, let's go back to it. It was like, this is great. And that hasn't changed. And it's gotten better every year. So, so yes, I'm here to tell you that you can quit that thing. You can stop being a slave to that thing. And praise God. Okay, so let me thank a couple people, and then we're gonna get into today's topic. Super Based. What's up, Super Based? Super Based gifted 10 Deprogrammed memberships. If you're one of the people who scooped up one of those memberships over at YouTube, you have Super Based to thank. It's one of my little membership fairies. I appreciate you. And he says, congratulations on 6 years, Keri. God bless. Thank you so much. It feels very good. And late congratulations on 20,000 subscribers. Thank you very much for the super chat. Yes, we hit 20K finally. I was stalled out at 19 something forever, and I'm not very good at doing all the algorithm tricks or figuring it out. And if anybody ever wants to come on and help with that side of it, is interested in growing Deprogrammed, and you're that kind of analytical person and you really like that kind of stuff, let me know. But it bores the hell out of me, and I'm not, even this episode today, I know I'm not doing things right in terms of playing the algorithm and doing something topical, talking about whatever's in the news and blah, 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 blah. But I just kind of am led more by what I feel moved to talk about. And today I feel moved to talk about something that's evergreen and is not a political topic, but we're going to be talking about prudence. And we're talking about prudence because it's been on my mind, because my church group, my ladies group, we're currently reading this book called Virtuous by Nancy Wilson. It's a quick little read. It's a thin book, and it's called Virtuous, a study for ladies in every age. And we just had a discussion about the chapter on prudence. So it's about all the different virtues, the 7 virtues, and we talked about the virtue of prudence, and then my husband and I were talking about it afterwards, and I thought, this is just such a great thing for young women. I wish a lot of times when I feel like I want to give advice to young women, but I know that if I were young and I heard an older woman trying to give me moral advice, I'd be like, shut up, old woman. Like, nobody wants to hear from you. I know how I was, and I know I wouldn't have received it well. And so I actually have been trying, instead I think about it in terms of things I wish I could tell my younger self, specifically me. That way, maybe it doesn't feel like a lecture for other women. Like, hey, you don't have to take it or leave it. Who cares what I say? But speaking to my younger self, there's lots of things of things I wish that I had known when I was younger. Things that I wish I had considered, ways in which I wish I had been raised, or things I wish I'd had better in moral instruction on certain things. I'll put it that way. And so learning about the virtues is something I'm doing for the first time, starting in my late 30s, early 40s, mid 40s now. Wow. And so that's okay. You can start to learn these things later in life. But wouldn't it have been great if I had learned some of this when I was younger, and I could have avoided a lot of mistakes and a lot of heartache? The older I get, the more I'm starting to understand that the Bible is not the way I thought about it when I was young. When I was in my 20s, I thought of it as this sort of authoritarian list of restrictions, and God is this sort of the very controlling and authoritarian dictator, and these are things you're not allowed to do, and it's a restriction of your freedom, right? And that's not the Bible at all. That's what a lot of times the left wants you to believe. Or take politics out of it. That's what the world wants you to believe. But that's not what the Bible is. It's actually more of a guidebook from a very loving Father who's trying to save you heartache and pain and trials, and who's trying to lay out a guidebook of the way for you to live well, for you to have the best life possible, even with all the things that are included in life, like heartache and suffering, for you to live a good life and to live well. Here's what works. Here's how he created you. Here's how he created us. It's like a user's manual, right? For life, like best use advice. And so we're going to talk about prudence, because I think a lot of young people don't know what this word means. Maybe older people don't know what it means. And it's really good to know what this virtue is and to think about it in your life. Yes, Dion, it's the user manual for humanity, written in the language we understand. Stories. It is. That's exactly it. Okay. So first, we're going to get a little nerdy, and we're going to look at a short video. It's less than 10 minutes, and it's about St. Thomas Aquinas, who talked a lot about the virtues. And this is more of a nerdy approach to, this is more of like using reason. Let's figure out where virtues are and specifically what is prudence. And I think this guy does a great job. I watched a lot of different people trying to break it down, and I thought this guy did the best job. His name is he's a friar, and anyway, I think he's going to introduce himself. We'll see. Here we go.
Prudence to modern ears signals caution or shrewdness in business dealings. When a risky entrepreneur makes his pitch, the prudent committee member counsels against the ill-fated course. But such has not always been the understanding of prudence in the Christian tradition. Rather, prudence is classically understood as a practical wisdom that empowers one to be good and to act well in daily affairs, both ordinary and extraordinary.
So this guy's name is Friar Gregory. He's got a lot of different videos on the virtues, and they're very concise, and I love them. You should go check out his whole series. One of the things he says is yes, in modern day, we tend to think of just the definition of being cautious. Like a lot of people use the word prudence in place of the word caution. So, when talking about, like he said, like a business decision or some type of financial investment, you might say you should be very prudent with your money. And people think of that as being cautious or being stingy. Even sometimes they think of that and in being cautious in any type of business scenario or political scenario. But it means a lot more than caution. It doesn't mean exactly. It's not a one for one. You can't replace the word prudent with cautious like one for one, because some things are going to involve risks. If you're, as he says, being prudent in the biblical sense is about thinking, living and acting and making decisions with forethought in the future and thinking about the consequences of your actions and acting towards the good, trying to make decisions towards what is good. And what is good is what is godly, right? And so sometimes what is good is going to require risks. We'll continue with, and I'll pause it once in a while. But again, this is less than 10 minutes, and I think it's just a great overview.
Prudence is an intellectual virtue, perfecting the practical reason. St. Thomas defines it as recta ratio agibilium, right reason in things to be done. It is classed with justice, fortitude, and temperance as a cardinal virtue. While technically not a moral virtue, since it doesn't perfect the appetite, yet it crowns or completes the moral virtues by orchestrating their movements. Each of the moral virtues, as we'll see, rectifies man's desires with regard to their particular ends. Prudence is responsible then for sorting out these virtuous desires as it fashions for man a reasonable life. At the root of prudential action is the natural law, man's sharing in the eternal law. By the natural law, we denote the inclination sown in man for the things befitting his rational nature. The natural law inclines man to the preservation of his existence, to the procreation and education of children, to live in society, and to know the truth about God and other like goods. The prudent man has had his appetites shaped by the moral virtues. For one to be prudent, one must also be just, courageous, and temperate. Otherwise, one is easily thrown for a loop by an inordinate attachment or a craven fear. Only the virtuous man has real existential insight into moral realities.
Okay, so what does that mean? We're going to stop and break that down for a second. So when he talks about the natural law and eternal law, the natural law is sort of the idea that God created us, like he created all beings in accordance with his eternal law. And with humans, that means that we have the ability to reason, which animals don't do, not in the same way. We have the ability to temper our appetites. The natural law is sort of like as he mentioned, we have a natural inclination towards self-preservation, towards procreation, towards having children and educating children. We have a natural inclination towards certain things like knowing the truth and knowing God. And so he's saying that if you're a prudent person, if you're a person who's acting towards the good, that you have mastered some of these different moral virtues like temperance, like courage. And so that's just to kind of break that down a little bit. I don't know if I'm very good at explaining this stuff yet because I'm learning a lot of it myself. So if I could be more clear, tell me what you're confused about, and that'll help me explain it better. Okay, thanks.
Aristotle often repeats, as the man is, so he sees. With this formation, the prudent man is free to see things as they are and to act in a way that builds up a truly human culture. Sometimes people conceive of prudence as a mere matter of thinking well, but beyond the knowing of what is right, prudence oversees the doing of what is right. Prudence applies one's knowledge of life, both general and particular, to concrete action. So, for instance, one might know habitually that innocent life should be preserved, and one might know further that a particular person is being unjustly accused of capital crime. The judgment of prudence would issue not only in your thinking that this situation is unjust, but in your giving testimony or doing what lies within your power to have the person acquitted. Prudence isn't merely about knowing the good, it's about doing the good. How then does a prudent act unfold? The prudent person first conceives of the end and then deliberates how best to attain it. This may involve weighing different options and discerning among them, but not necessarily so. This first step we call counsel. Then, he chooses the most adequate, appropriate, or effective means for attaining the end. This may take time to determine or may simply come together spontaneously in a burst of insight. The second step we call judgment. Finally, he applies his judgment to action in carrying out the deed. Here, the interior act becomes visible in its exterior dimensions. This final step we call command. Breaking out these steps might suggest to the human mind that prudence just orders different stages of a mental process that issues in choice, as if it were a mere matter of calculating and evaluating. Now, while we do want to affirm the importance of this aspect of prudence, we also want to broaden our understanding. Ultimately, the prudent person is one who inclines spontaneously to the truth of his life. He needn't always be discerning or deliberating. Rather, we see his prudence in action and in his honest appraisal of his action.
Okay, so let me pause this and we'll talk about this for a second. I found this part very interesting because he's breaking down the different parts of prudence or the different parts of making a prudent decision. And practically speaking, as humans, we have all kinds of decisions that we make every day. And some of these are big and life-changing and some are small. But in every one of those decisions, we are going through these different parts. We're going through, especially for the big decisions, we're going through counsel, judgment, and command, right? Counsel, judgment, and action, basically. And he's saying it doesn't mean that with every decision you have to sit and go through this moral reasoning with the small decisions. You don't sit there and you may not take counsel on what to get for dinner for the family tonight, right? That you become naturally inclined towards certain things. Kind of like the natural law that we talked about earlier. You are naturally inclined the more that you grow towards God to choose what is right, perfect, beautiful, good, what is true, right? So it's not like every decision you're sitting and weighing every time in the same way. But when you do weigh a decision, you have this, he breaks into these three parts, which I thought was interesting because I've experienced this, and I'm sure some of you guys have. This part where he talks about counsel, and that's where you determine what the best outcome is or the best goal. And counsel is where you are literally like taking counsel from friends who are wise. And that's very important. I think in the modern world, we sometimes tend to take counsel from people who we shouldn't be taking counsel from. People who are worldly, who don't have a good track record. We see this sometimes in politics, also where people and in influencer culture, where people are giving advice on things that they have not mastered themselves. Where people are giving advice on, oh my gosh, we see this in the red pill community where you see unmarried women giving advice on marriage. What's her name? Pearly Things is a great example. And insulting married women and married men and things like, and it's like sort of like, why are you even listening to this person about marriage? Because she hasn't proven herself to be someone who's mastered this thing, or who's even attempted this thing, who's even attempted it. Do you know what I mean? That's just the first example that comes to mind. But sometimes we take counsel from friends and people who are in our lives who we really shouldn't be giving that position to them to counsel and to give advice if they haven't shown that they have wisdom. And wisdom is different than knowledge. Wisdom is kind of like the practical application of knowledge. Again, aimed towards the good. And when I became a Christian, I definitely started limiting that role in my life. The people whose counsel I sought, it changed. It used to be when I was sort of untethered to anything. I wasn't tethered to God. I wasn't tethered to the word. I wasn't tethered to this, belief system, this faith that's like the bedrock of who I am now. I wasn't tethered to that. And I would just sort of, why not ask this person? Why not ask that person? And the world will give you all kinds of unwise advice. The world tells women to be like men. That's what they call it anyway, being like men, when they tell them to be sexually promiscuous. They think men are that way, and so women should be that way. They say it's empowering. They tell young women that there's nothing wrong with having multiple sexual partners. They tell them it's actually a positive thing. The world tells young women that abortion is no different than getting your tonsils removed. That it's not the killing of a human, which it is the killing of a human, whether you want to call that murder or not, but it is the killing of a human. They do everything, the world does everything it can to obscure that truth. The world is like, what does it say? Do you and treat yourself. And it's just this affirmation to the point of being bad for you, being toxic for you, leading you in a place that's not living well, but living poorly. And you can see this, and if you think about not only your life and maybe some of the bad choices you've made from listening to unwise counsel, right? But in the choices of friends and people around you, you can see this too. Sometimes it's easier to see things in the lives of people around us than it is in ourselves. But we want to get to the point where we can see it in our own life, right? To be prudent in our own life and not just like, oh, that person did that wrong. I did that wrong too. But sometimes it's easier, at least at the beginning, I think, to see it in other people and say, wow, that's not really living well. A lot of the women I know who are still in that old worldly lifestyle, who haven't yet found Christ, who haven't yet found the freedom of Christ. Let me put it that way. I'm not saying all of them. I know I have a lot of atheist friends who are going to be like, Keri, I live well. That's true. I'm just saying, on average, a lot of the women I know who are still in that lifestyle that the world tells you this is the best way to live now, right? They're not happy. You can see this in studies also and surveys. I've covered that on this channel before. Women's self-reported rates of unhappiness are off the charts. Women are much more unhappy now than they were in the 1950s. Isn't that crazy? If you look at surveys of how pleased are you with your life, wouldn't you think if you according to leftist dogma, in the 1950s, there was a book called The Feminine Mystique, which came out, and it talked about the problem that has no name. It was written by Betty Friedan. It's a very popular feminist book from the 50s, and it was about how women were just full of malaise and unhappiness, and they were self-reporting that they were unhappy, and this was because they culturally didn't have equity with men, right? And that women needed to go into the workforce and they would find happiness there, and we needed to sexually liberate women, and all it sort of led to all these different things of like, let's break down gender roles, traditional gender roles. And I think a lot of feminism at that point started pushing women to become more like what feminists think men are like. And what happened after that? Was it suddenly, did the happiness rates go up? Were women like, oh my goodness, now we're doing all these other things, we're sexually liberated, we're in the workforce, we're blah blah blah, are we happier? And you actually see the opposite is true. Now, this isn't any kind of argument against women being able to work or anything. Of course, I think women should be able to work. It's just in your personal choice and what you choose to do and how you choose to live. A lot of the promises that feminism made turned out to be bankrupt. This whole idea of like, you will be happier if you do this, if you choose career first. Well, that's not true, clearly. So that wasn't the answer to the malaise. Women, especially white women, are taking antidepressants, SSRIs, at unprecedented rates, more than any other demographic group today. So all of this to say, the world and the people who are maybe the loudest voices giving women, young women, counsel and advice, they're not necessarily the wisest voices. And so counsel is very important. The other thing that happens when in this part of making a prudent decision, where he's talking about, counsel, judgment, and then action or command. So during counsel, you're getting advice. Hopefully you're talking things over with your friends who are wise, friends who you look up to and respect, who've done something to earn and deserve that place of counsel in your life, right? You're talking it over with them. But if you're a believer, the other thing you're doing is you're talking to God. You're praying about it. You're talking with your spouse about it. If you're married, you're reading scripture about it. You're in the word. You're taking counsel from God about it. If if it is a life-changing decision, a very big decision, or if it's a decision that you're struggling with and you're not sure what the best choice is, counsel is very important, and you're going to be taking counsel from God and from your friends who are wise. This is going to help me. Thank you so much, John Bertram, for this comment. John says, let people do what they feel is best. Yes, we both agree. What I'm saying is a lot of times what the world tells you is best is not what's best. And so be very prudent in who you listen to, who you turn to for advice. Be all the things that come with prudent, right? Be discerning, be cautious, be circumspect, all of those things. Circumspect meaning look at all the circumstances at play. Discerning, meaning using wisdom to determine what's good and what's bad, or who's a good influence and who's a bad influence. And sometimes that means like looking at the person and saying, have they mastered this subject that they're giving me advice on? Do they live a good life? Have they lived well? If they're giving me financial advice, do they know what they're talking about? Do we see that they have they've been very prudent with their money and in their investments, like, or have they are they a bankrupt person who's telling me about how to save money, right? Like that sort of those are some things to look at. Okay, we'll continue.
Conversation with friends, and before the Lord in prayer, he revisits his life, that reason might more perfectly imbue his actions. Prudence has different expressions depending upon the setting. One must be prudent for himself. St. Thomas calls this monastic prudence. But one must also be prudent with and for others. In these settings, a specifically different prudence is requisite. And so St. Thomas will describe the prudence proper to family life, military exploits, business ventures, political arrangements. Different relationships elicit different virtuous agency, and thus distinct manifestations of the virtue of prudence. When St. Thomas talks about the virtues, he'll often describe their different parts. He lists them as subjective parts, integral parts, and potential parts. We just saw the subjective parts of prudence. These are just the different species of prudence that arise in different social settings: monastic, domestic, military, political, etc. We'll hold off on our discussion of potential parts until we get to justice. Here, though, a word about integral parts. St. Thomas likens the integral parts of a virtue to the foundation, walls, and roof of a house. They are the type of parts that compose the thing. They are not themselves virtues in the full sense of the word, but taken together constitute the wholeness or integrity of the virtue under consideration. In the case of prudence, there are 8 integral parts. We can divide them into the parts that concern counsel, those that concern judgment, and those that concern command. There are 3 that concern counsel. First is memory or knowledge of the past. This gives an adequate appraisal of past situations as they bear on the present. Second, there is docility, which opens one to the wisdom of others. Third, there is understanding, which is a kind of intuitive acumen for getting to the principles of things. There are 2 integral parts that concern judgment. First is shrewdness, whereby one judges without excessive deliberation, but rather spontaneously and adroitly. Second is reason, which has one proceed through the ordinary steps proper to moral reasoning. Finally, there are 3 integral parts which concern command. First, there is foresight, since one must be able to project into the future in order to envision how his decision will play itself out. Second is circumspection, which makes one attentive to pertinent circumstances as they shape the execution of an act. And third, one must be cautious so as to avoid obstacles as they present themselves.
Okay, I'm going to stop right here. This is about 6 minutes, 45 seconds in. The whole thing is only 9 minutes and something. You should watch the whole thing. It's great, but this is enough for us for today. I highly recommend this channel. His name is Friar Gregory. As someone mentioned, he's a Dominican friar, and like Friar Tuck in Robin Hood. I'm still learning about what friars are versus monks, and friars are the ones they're like male Catholics who go out into the world and teach. They, instead of staying in a monastery, and I'm sure someone in the chat knows more about the distinction between friars and monks and can explain that better than I can, but I've been learning about that too. So hi, Laura Kirkpatrick, coming in hot. Good to see you. So we were talking about prudence. So we just watched sort of a breakdown of a theologian who's talking about prudence as one of the 7 virtues and what makes up prudence and defining it in the Christian tradition. And I am going to get to this book, which sort of prompted all this book, Virtuous by Nancy Wilson. But I wanted to show you something interesting. You guys know I love antiques. I love old things. I love history. And I have this book. It's called The Complete Home. And it's by Miss Julia McNair Wright. And it needs to be I need to have somebody rebind it. It's so old. This is from 1879. And I found it at actually I got this one at, there's a bookstore in Austin where they sell all of the old books from the library that are no longer, nobody's checking out anymore. And sometimes they sell rare books for a really good price, that ones that are in bad condition. So I got this old book for a great price, but like I said, it needs to be rebound. Anyway, this book came out in 1879, and it was known for being a book about like how to run your household, like a complete encyclopedia for domestic life. And it's here, let me read like a little summary of what I pulled up, a summary for those of you who are not familiar with this book. It talks about how the household and its foundation, order, economy, beauty, healthfulness, emergencies, methods, children, literature, amusements, religion, friendships, manners, hospitality, servants, industry, money, and history. Basically, this is supposed to be, when it came out in 1879, this was a guidebook for women on how to manage your home life, the domestic sphere, including industry, money, relationships, love, all of it, amusements, practical advice, and more like moral advice, I guess you would say. And so I was looking in here to see if she talked about prudence, and of course she does, and she weaves it all throughout the book. She talks about here, I'm going to read some of the best quotes from it. So, prudence and foresight are the first elements of comfort. A house chosen without thought of its fitness is a burden from the beginning. So even in like choosing your house, if you're buying your first house, she talks about using prudence and foresight into what kind of house you're buying, how much money are you spending, all the things that you would have to, even though this book was written in 1879, these things still apply. This is why this is interesting to me, because I think women used to think a lot more about these things. And not just women, men too. We used to think about things that mattered more. And now we seem to think, I don't know, we talk more about shallow, unimportant crap. I hate to generalize, but it seems like not the people I hang around with. I'm just saying. And if you look at popular culture, if you look at what young people are talking about on TikTok, a lot of times it's just crap. There's a show, sometimes I watch junk food for the brain. I'll watch crappy reality shows because I want to see what's in the public consciousness, like what's going on in the world, right? And there's this reality show called Love is Blind. I know I've mentioned it before. It's just a microcosm into what is terrible about the world. And this new season, I watched a little bit of it, and it's probably usually there's one or two couples who make it, where they actually make it, and you can see them growing into a healthy relationship with each other. This, I don't know if it's the first season where there's nobody, if you just watch even the first episode, you're like, nobody's going to make it. These are all shallow, narcissistic people. This is terrible. And you get to see them interacting with each other, and all they do is make dirty, sexual, crass jokes. That's it. They don't have any conversation that's deeper than that. Generally, it's just all little, what they think are witty comebacks that are related to toilet humor or sexual humor, and that's it. And since supposedly the goal of the show is to find your spouse and to get married, you would think that there would be conversations about deeper, more meaningful things, but there are not. And so, but if you look back in history at a book like The Complete Home from 1879, you can see these are things people thought about. These are things that women talked about. And so they talked about prudence. She talks about prudence and foresight when choosing your first home. She talks about prudence in money. And she says, economy is not miserliness, but prudence joined to taste and foresight. So basically, you don't have to live like a monk or like a pauper in order to be prudent, but you have to pair taste with foresight, with an eye to the future and how much money you have and whether it's a good investment or whether a price tag is worth it or not. I'll say something about being prudent with money when you're a woman and when you become a wife. So there are lots of ways in which I've had to grow in prudence, and I still have to grow in prudence. And one of those is I have to stop I've tried to become less impulsive in my spending. If you are a person who was raised without prudent guidance from role models, if you weren't taught about money, and I know a lot of millennials, people younger than me, were not. They were not taught about money. They were not taught how to save, how to be prudent with the money they have. A lot of them are falling victim to different, not just payday loan schemes, but this sort of pay as you go companies, the ones that are, when you go to buy a pizza online, it's like, do you want to pay for this pizza in 4 easy payments? And they're really taking advantage of young people who haven't been given any guidance about money. So let me just tell you, one of the first things you should do is listen to someone who has a lot more wisdom, a lot more experience than I do on this subject. And I almost said, it's not, what's his name? I'm blanking. I got another name. This is an old person. Somebody in the chat, tell me. It starts with a D. What's his name? It's the guy who tells you about how to save. He helped me so much, and I can't even think of his name. Okay, it'll come to me. Dave Ramsey. There we go. It came. It came to me. So Dave Ramsey, he has a whole series on YouTube. He's got books. He tells you like the basics of how to put aside money for emergency funds, how to save, how to buy vehicles, how to buy houses. He tends towards not doing credit at all, but he talks you through all of it. If you didn't have that kind of practical advice on money, I think this is one of the things that we should be teaching in school. We've sort of gotten away from common sense things. And so like, we don't teach home. I don't know many schools that that teach home ec anymore. How to cook, how to clean, how to take care of money, how to, how to regard credit, like whether to take out credit or not. And so for those of you who missed that instruction, he's a great resource, Dave Ramsey. He can tell you more about money, definitely more about money than I can. So in being prudent and in being someone's wife and trying to be a prudent wife, I've had to become a lot less impulsive in my spending. And does that mean, like this book says, does that mean that you have to become a miser? No, definitely not. You don't have to become a miser. God has aimed us towards the good, the true, and the beautiful. And I believe that aesthetically, we should be aimed towards creating a beautiful environment. We are cultivators. We are created to be cultivators. When God put Adam in the Garden of Eden, it was to cultivate and the garden and make it beautiful. And so we are meant to do that. And in our daily lives, I know women who are, just the most amazing cultivated, whether it's cooking, gardening, designing their home aesthetically. Like there's so many different ways you can channel that talent or that desire to beautify things around you. And knitters, there's lots of knitters in the chat who I see you guys, you're always posting your beautiful projects. That's a part of making things beautiful. That's a part of cultivating. That's a part of creating. And that's a good and perfect thing. And so in the home life, like for example, Anthony kind of lets me choose some of the stuff. As we renovate this old home, this home was built in 1914, and we've tried to preserve some of the aesthetic from that time period, mixed with kind of an eclectic, some modern things as well. But he sort of lets me choose, or he has let me choose a lot of the furniture and things like that. And when doing that, you have to keep an eye on the pocketbook, because we are not people of means. God always comes through for us. He always provides. But, it's not like we have extra money. Despite what they're saying on X, all the woke right people, I do not get paid $7,000 a post. They say that's about all these people, conservatives now. They're like, the Jews are paying you $7,000. No, they're not. That would be lovely, but that's not happening. So we have to keep an eye on our budget. And so every year we kind of pray about and talk about, what are we going to renovate this year? And we're like 3 or 4 years in now. And it doesn't always work out the way we planned. There's a verse in James about how, I'm going to butcher it, but it's sort of about how when you pray, or when you make plans, you shouldn't say, tomorrow I'm going to go to this city, I'm going to do this and that and that. You should say, God willing, I'm going to do this and that. You have to always account for God's will in what you're doing. And so in our prayers, we try and pray, like, if you are willing, this is what we would like, help us provide for this. And sometimes there are things that need more immediate attention. So for example, this year we were planning on renovating the kitchen and the backyard, like doing all the landscaping. Those are 2 very big projects, and big in terms of both effort and money. And those are the things we had planned on doing. But God willing, right? Because at the beginning of the year, we had our whole sewage drain, our whole sewage pipe, the sewage line went out, and it was a clay pipe. We found out it was the original sewage line for this house, and it had to be replaced with something more modern. And so that was an expense we had not accounted for. And so that came out of what we had intended to spend for the kitchen, right? So because we were prudent, we had that money set aside. We were already planning to use it for the kitchen. We used it for this other thing instead. And then on top of that, my surgery, which ended up being a lot more expensive than we thought. And so that means this year we're not doing a kitchen. Now we've put it on the goal for next year. Kind of have to go with what life hands you, right? But we did do the backyard. We've been working on the backyard and landscaping, hardscaping, doing as much of it ourselves as we can. My husband's done a lot of work in the backyard. And so being prudent in terms of our renovation means that we have these big projects we set aside each year. And then we also will work on smaller things like around the house. Like we will still be working on maybe like we're not working on the music parlor anymore, but if I see a piece of furniture that's like perfect for that room and we decide to get it for that room, we can do that. So how do I choose? How do you choose if you want something? If you're a woman and you have a spending problem, I know a lot of women with spending problems. And I speak from experience. It has to be a good deal. So there's a quote that I love, and this quote used to be, I've seen it attributed to Benjamin Franklin, but if you look it up, I'm not sure if it's actually from him or not. But the quote is the sweetness of the bitterness of poor quality. The bitterness of poor quality is remembered long after the sweetness of low cost is forgotten. And what does that mean? That means if you buy something just because it's cheap, but it's poor quality, you're going to have to replace that over and over and over again. So sometimes it is more prudent to spend more the first time and get something that's of high quality that's going to last you a lifetime. Now, I first heard this quote back when I sold handmade cowboy boots, and it was perfect for what we were selling because we were selling boots that were lifetime boots. And our boots ranged from in price at the time. Now they've gone up. I looked at my old, the company I used to work with and the handmade boots, and they've gone up since then because of inflation and tariffs and all kinds of things. But back then they ranged in price from $500 to $2,000 for a pair. Now, if you're an average person off the street, you don't know anything about boots, that sounds crazy. But, why would you spend that much on a pair of boots? But in reality, if on the low end of those handmade boots, you could get a pair for $500. That's pretty much only double what you'd pay for factory made boots anyway. And the factory made boots are going to fall apart in a few years. Whereas the handmade boots going to last you forever. You just keep getting it rehealed and resold. So quality does matter. And if you can spend a little more upfront to have something that you're not going to have to keep replacing, and in the case of the example of the boots I gave, which is going to be better for your spine because they have a steel shank inside, right? Which puts your spine in correct alignment. It's not going to be bad. A lot of times factory boots are going to hurt your feet. They're going to hurt your spine, your posture, the way you walk. If you get something that's good for your feet and for your back and it's lifetime, it's better to spend a little bit more upfront and not have to keep replacing that with more shoddy versions of it over and over, right? So I think about that when we make big purchases for the house. Is it something that's going to last a lifetime? In the modern world, a lot of things are not made with prudence anymore. You guys know this. One of my friends, Josh Slocum from Disaffected, he talks about this a lot, but a lot of modern appliances are crappy. I hate modern vacuum cleaners. They're plastic pieces of crap. They're just terrible. And I started looking to see if anybody's making vacuum cleaners like the old style, the old way, the ones that last forever, And I did find some, but they're like $1,000. And at first, like I said with the boots, an average person, me looking at that, is like, whoa, there's no way I'd pay that much for a vacuum cleaner. But I've started thinking about it. I'm like, maybe one day I will pay that much for a vacuum cleaner. Maybe one day I will pay that much and never have to replace it again and have one that actually works and doesn't fall apart. And it actually has good suction and all the stuff that vacuum cleaners used to do, right? Who knows? Maybe it's better to spend, because if I add up all the money I've spent on crappy modern vacuum cleaners, it totals that anyway. Doesn't it? So this is about like practical advice. Oh my gosh, WG, thanks for hanging out and being very generous with the super chat. He says, $100. Here's some extra money for the house. God bless. You're awesome. Thank you so much for the generosity. I will spend it prudently. I promise you. We will be very prudent with it. Oh, thank you so much. But for women, this is I don't know. Hopefully it's good advice. Here's one way you can save money and be prudent with your money, especially if you're a wife and you don't want to rack up debt for your husband. You can decide what's worth the price tag and what's not. So I gave the example of boots. That's something I'm willing to spend money on to get a lifetime pair of boots and something that's good for my back and my feet, right? So I will spend a lot on boots. But clothing, I don't care. Unless it's a really nice piece for a special occasion and I know I'll wear it a lot, I rarely spend money on clothes. And what I mean by that is like even this shirt, any given day, I don't even have to plan it. Any given day, what I'm wearing is from a thrift store from Goodwill. This shirt probably costs $2. There's no sense, at least in my mind, if you're going to save money somewhere, there's no sense in going to a store and buying brand new stuff. And unless it's some special reason, or maybe it's your birthday and you're going to splurge on this one outfit that's, you're always going to remember that day, right? I've done that before where it's like, hey, it's my birthday kimono or whatever. I'm going to remember this is my birthday. But normally, like, no, you can afford to save money there because almost, unfortunately, we're in the modern world currently. There's so many companies producing this almost like fast food fashion where it's just clothes that nonstop. The costs have come down on it, and you can find like all the designer stuff anyway. If that's what you're into, you can find it at the thrift stores now. It ends up there. And there's so many people who run through clothing quickly and buy a whole new wardrobe, and they just turn over the stuff to Goodwill or whatever. So you can find whatever kind of stuff you like to wear there. And unlike with boots, this shirt has nothing to do with my spine being in alignment or anything like that. So why do I need to spend more on a $2 shirt versus I don't know, what are they in stores? 30, 40 more? I don't know. So that's one way you can be frugal and be prudent with your money and save it for things that do matter more when it comes to the way you dress. The other thing is, part of prudence is having forethought to the future, right? As we mentioned, like thinking towards, am I going to have enough money for XYZ down the road? If I spend on, let's say you find something. Sometimes I found something and it's a great deal and the price is right for that thing. And it's not just that it's a beautiful antique Victorian couch, but also the price is good and I really want to get it. Well, sometimes you still have to say no because your budget is limited and you have to keep money in that budget for anything that's unexpected. So it's not enough for it to be a great item that's going to last a lifetime and is also a good price. You have to have forethought to, what else might come up for you this year, whether it's a surgery or a sewage line going out. Like, what else might happen this year? Can I afford to splurge right now? Sometimes you cannot, and you have to walk away from that. I've talked to women. I'm sure we all know, maybe you're a woman who has a spending problem, or maybe you know somebody who does. And I've talked to women who do. And one thing you can do is aversion therapy. If you're a person who struggles with this, maybe you're a person who goes to Target several times a week and fills up your shopping cart with stuff and you're putting it on credit or whatever, which is a crazy way to live. But if you're a person doing that, I suggested this to a friend once, like maybe you go in there and you do what you normally would do and you fill up your shopping cart with all the stuff you don't need that you're just putting in the basket because you're there. And then you look at all of it and you walk away. You just walk away. Like, try doing that. Try owning the addiction instead of letting it own you. Try being the one in charge instead of being a slave to that. And for people for whom this is their thing, I know some of them said, I cannot imagine doing that. And I can relate to drinking, right? For me, it was like the idea of quitting drinking But once you master that thing and you say, I am not going to be a slave to you anymore, I'm going to make you work for me. Like, I'm going to be in command. You gain so much empowerment, to use one of their words, modern words, right? You gain just this self-confidence that you asserted yourself over this thing. So you could try that. You could try aversion therapy if that's a problem that you have. Maggie Two Sticks. Hey, Maggie, what's up? One of the knitters. She says, Keri, aversion therapy is a great idea. A lot of times I will look at yarn online and put it in the cart and then close the computer and walk away. Yes, Maggie, you get it. It's the act of saying, I'm going to do the opposite thing this time. And don't you feel so powerful after you do that? Rock Lexicon. Keri, did you see Josh Slocum just did a segment on his most recent episode all about getting vintage appliances and decor? Did y'all coordinate? No, but I know he tweets about it from time to time. I didn't see his new segment, but he and I have this in common. I completely agree with my friend Slocum on this. The older stuff is better. Like, they made it to last. It's not crappy. It's the same principle as the handmade boots that I mentioned. It's, the sweetness of low price is forgotten. The bitterness of low quality remains long after the sweetness of low price is forgotten. And so sometimes it's worth it to spend on things that are higher quality. And a lot of times that means older things. Yeah, Slocum and I have this in common. We have a lot of older things in this house. I mean, I have one of the old Sunbeam mixers. You guys know those from, I think it's like the 50s or 60s. We just had a bake sale in my town, and that a lot of the women cooked for we baked for, and my husband made muffins. And I made some pasties and some pies and stuff. And I use that old mixer. That mixer is better than the plastic stuff, the modern stuff that you can buy in Target today. That old mixer still works. I found it in a thrift store and I got rid of the plastic one I had. And I just use the old one now. It's better quality. So, okay, let's look at, I kind of went off on a tangent about some practical advice on being prudent with money. But I think that's important. Like I said, check out Dave Ramsey if you're bad with money, and we can talk more about this if you want to as a woman. But when you become a wife, the Bible says that the wife is the crown for the husband. Like, the wife is meant to bring her husband honor, dignity, joy. The wife is meant to be, make her husband like royalty. And if you are racking up debt and you get married, now it's not just your responsibility. Now it's your husband's responsibility too. And you do not want to be a burden on your husband. You want to be a prudent wife. You want to make his life better by being prudent with money and making wise decisions with money. When we met, I had debt and my husband did not. And it was very important to him that I come up with a plan to pay off that debt, which I did. I'd also made some good investments at the time. And so fortunately I was able to pay it off. And we are in a place now, because he's a good leader and because of God's blessings, where even though we're not people of means, we are debt free, which is amazing. It's almost unheard of today to have a blessing like that, to be debt free. If you're not people of means, right? So we don't have a lot of excess money or anything, but we also don't have debt that we're paying off anymore, which is most Americans are carrying debt now. And if you're carrying debt on a house or a car or school loans or whatever, and then you're adding to it with credit card debt for things that you don't need, like, you're just you're not being very prudent. And a lot of modern culture, unfortunately, is geared towards taking advantage of people and getting young people into these bad situations. That's what these new companies that tell them they can, pay off your Uber Eats order in 4 payments, that's crazy. It's basically you're it's like credit card debt in a way, but they're getting around a lot of the regulations, the credit card regulations, and they're taking advantage of young people and getting them to take out what amounts to a line of credit to pay off. Why not get that new purse you want, and the other 5 purses you want, and the other 10 wardrobe things you want, because you can pay it off in 4 payments now. Like that's not wise. Young people, it's not wise at all. Yeah. Get out of debt as quickly as possible. Yes, Davina. Yes. Okay. So let's get to the Bible verses about prudence. So this is one I wanted to show. Here we go. So this one says, this is Proverbs 19:14. We talked about this in our women's group. A house and riches are an inheritance from fathers, but a prudent wife is from the Lord. So the Bible talks about prudence over and over as it relates to women and wives, and it talks about how it's a true gift from God to have a prudent wife. Like, how can you find a prudent wife? And for women, I think the question is like, how do you become a more prudent wife? How do you become a more prudent woman? And you can do that when it comes to money, managing the household, purchasing, things like that. But you can also do it in the way that you dress, the way that you speak, the way that you carry yourself. So to return to this book for a second, The Complete Home, the old book that I love. So she has some chapters on manners, friendships, and religion, where she talks about how prudence in speech is she calls it one of the home's rarest ornaments. Prudence in the way you speak is a rare ornament. The prudent woman guards her tongue as well as her purse. That's a great quote. She guards her tongue as well as her purse. So a big part of prudence is discretion. And if we get back to Nancy Wilson's book, Virtuous, she talks about how prudence and discretion are related. And often in the Bible, when you read about prudence, there's going to be something in there also about discretion or about wisdom. Like the Bible talks about those things all together. So I'm going to read you just a couple of verses that she quotes in her book because I think they're great. She says, prudence and discretion are often mentioned together in the same verse, like in Proverbs 8:12. I, wisdom, dwell with prudence and find out knowledge and discretion. She says, we see here that both prudence and discretion keep company with wisdom and knowledge. And notice that wisdom is searching out discretion. Our lives should be characterized by a desire for more, not more stuff, but more knowledge and wisdom. When we seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, he will take care of food and clothing and all we need. That's from Matthew 6:33. Part of seeking his righteousness is to be diligently adding virtue to our faith and searching for more wisdom and more spiritual knowledge. Think of wisdom and prudence as scholarly companions, reading books full of godly knowledge and wisdom. That's what a prudent wife is like. So here's a couple of verses that she quotes. I think these are great. The discretion of a man makes him slow to anger, and his glory is to overlook a transgression. That's Proverbs 19:11. And then another one, the simple or the fool believes every word, but the prudent considers well his steps. That one also made me think of a lot of the influencers online right now who are pulling people down some very crazy and dark paths and sowing all kinds of division and foolishness and just craziness. One of these people I've mentioned before is Candace Owens. Is completely off the rails. The last video clip I saw of hers, well, not only is she blaming everyone under the sun for Charlie Kirk's murder in a completely imprudent fashion, by the way, and not a very discreet fashion, but she's blamed the state of Israel, Mossad, the US government, US intelligence agencies, Trump. She's now blamed Trump, TPUSA, and now she's blaming his assistant and one of his best friends, Mikey McCoy, and his father, one of Charlie's pastors, Rob McCoy. And she's basically just blamed everyone except for the accused killer who's sitting in jail right now. And we're waiting to see the state's case, the prosecution's case against him. But it's this crazy sort of, oh, and she blamed some bee cult, like a bee as in bees, that has something to do with her kid's school, which is not in Utah, but then also to do with the Utah state flag, which has a beehive on it, and just some weird, crazy thing about beehives. I don't know. It's getting crazier and crazier. And then I saw a clip where she was talking about how Elon Musk is not human and he is part alien. And I'm just saying, I've said this before, you have to be discerning. You have to learn discernment. And just as discerning as we have become with the mainstream news, corporate media, and being able to discern that they are liars and that they are spreading propaganda, you have to be that discerning with people who rush in to take the place of that. You have to be that discerning with a lot of the influencers that you listen to. I have to be that discerning. And there are people that I used to trust who I came to learn that God revealed to me that it was wrong to put my trust in them, or that they had really gotten off the path, put it that way, the path towards truth and towards prudence. And so that's just one example when it says the simple, the foolish believe every word, but the prudent considers well his steps. So you have to be prudent. She continues, prudence is not gullible like the idle women in 2 Timothy 3:6. Oh, that's a great verse. We're going to read that because that relates to what I was just talking about. It's been a while since I've looked at that verse, but I know which one she's talking about. Let's just read all of leading up to this verse too. Here we go. Can you guys see this? Oh, there it is. So 2 Timothy 3. But mark this, there will be terrible times in the last days. People will be lovers of themselves. Does that sound like today? Yes. Lovers of money above everything else. Yes, that sounds like today. Boastful, proud, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, without love, unforgiving, slanderous. Does that sound like today? Accusing all kinds of innocent people of murder. Does that sound like today? Slanderous, without self-control, brutal, and not lovers of the good, treacherous, rash, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. This sounds like the modern religion of today, especially on the left. But, it's not bound by one political party. Lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. Having a form of godliness but denying its power. Have nothing to do with such people. That's almost like, be prudent in who you choose to surround yourself with. They are the kind who worm their way into homes and gain control over gullible women who are loaded down with sins and are swayed by all kinds of evil desires, always learning, but never able to come to a knowledge of the truth. This verse is so important, and I've thought about it a lot over the past 8 years because woke ideology, woke leftist ideology, which is the predominant religion today. It's the biggest belief system today in the West. And I used to be in it. I was in it for 20 years. As many of you know, it's predominantly women who are pulled into the woke left. They are more susceptible. We are more susceptible to it. There's lots of reasons for that. I think one of those is because it plays on the emotions and it plays on empathy. It perverts empathy. It really taps into women's empathy and their natural inclination towards childbearing and child rearing. It taps into that and it perverts it, meaning it like turns it upside down and it uses it towards a negative end, not towards good ends. And women are more susceptible to that. But this is really important. There are also people who claim to be on the right who can worm their way into homes or into your ear and gain your attention and gain control over gullible people. But here it says gullible women who are loaded down with sins and swayed by all kinds of evil. That's a powerful sentence, says Roz. It is. It is. Okay. So we were talking about prudence in the home. Oh, prudence of your tongue, like prudence in how you speak. And this book, which I highly recommend, is called Virtuous by Nancy Wilson, was including some different places where the Bible talks about this and how prudence is not gullible like the idle women in 2 Timothy 3:6. So I'll continue. She says, prudence is a little cynical and cautious about what she hears. Cynical and cautious about what she hears. That would help us with a lot of these influencers lately. Cynical and cautious about what she hears, and she's slow to pass on tales. Slow to gossip, slow to speak, right? Not only that, but she is farsighted and can anticipate what the consequences of her behavior might be. That's why she carefully considers her next steps, and she doesn't just like lurch. She thinks things over and takes her time. She's not impulsive or driven by her emotions. This is true for men and women. A lot of times when men are driven by emotions, the emotion is anger. And not always, but a lot of times it's anger. And so it doesn't get coded in our modern world as emotional, but it is. Anger is an emotion. And for women, I think a lot of times we do see women driven by anger. I definitely seen that. But sometimes women are driven by pain, hurt. They lash out or they act impulsively because of pain or hurt or anger. And it's not good for men or women to be a slave to their emotions. Like emotions are a human thing that we experience, but we are supposed to gain mastery of them. Much like vices, like we can't be slaves to them. We're supposed to command our emotions. We're supposed to experience them, let them inform us and let them pass, but not to act impulsively because of them. So being angry about a wrong that's done to you, for example, there's nothing wrong with being angry about it. You're supposed to be angry. It's a human feeling. You're also supposed to be angry at unrighteousness and things that are evil and wicked. Your heart, the closer you grow to God, the way I understand it anyway, is that you grow more affection for the things that are good and true and beautiful, and you start to have a lot more hatred for the things that are wicked and perverted, and that just happens naturally. And so you're supposed to be angry about wickedness, but it's what you do with that anger. It's how you act on it and how you use it that can be good or bad. Not everything you do with your anger is prudent. Not everything you do with your sadness is prudent. I say this from experience and making the wrong decision sometimes. I'm just laughing because, I have messed up a lot, and I will continue probably to make bad choices, imprudent choices, and learn from them, hopefully. So there's one other verse in here I want to read to you. The wise in heart will be called prudent, and sweetness of the lips increases learning. That's Proverbs 16:21. And she says, prudence begins in the heart of a wise woman. And like everything else in our hearts, it comes out of her mouth. Jesus said, for out of the abundance of the heart, his mouth speaks. In the case of the prudent, it comes out in sweetness. Also notice that the sweetness increases learning. It is edifying and it builds up. Not at all like the foolish woman in Proverbs 14:1, who's pulling down her house with her own hands. So let me talk about this one just for a second for women and for wives. So I shared this in our women's group yesterday, but I'm friends with all kinds of people. I'm friends with all kinds of non-believers. You guys know this. We have friends in the chat who are atheists and friends of different faiths. And the Bible it's not like a cult. It's not like woke leftism. You know, woke leftism, my old religion, that was basically like, it tells you have to unfriend people and cut off friends and family if they're not a part of the belief system. And, you know, all these people on the left like post these things about like, oh, I'm unfriending all of my Trump supporting relatives. It's very cult like. Christianity is not like that. You're not called to like stop being friends with people who are non-believers. Quite the opposite. But you are not to become like them. You are not to partake in the ways of the world. You are in the world, but once you are saved, you are no longer of the world. You're in the world, but you're not of the world. And over time, this is something I've experienced, and you can tell me in the chat if you've experienced this too. I assume it's a natural thing that happens as your affections change and are shaped by the Holy Spirit. But over time, I've found that I can spend less time around people who are constantly in a kind of a state of depravity in terms of how they speak and stuff. Like I can be around it. Don't you know, I hang out on all kinds of streams as well. And in my real life, I hang out with people who are not believers, and I could be around all kinds of profanity and degenerate talk. And, you know, I can hang or whatever with it, but I'm just saying, if that's all a person does, and it's just constantly like being around them is like just being around a toilet all the time, like I've gotten to where I just find it, I don't know, a waste of time sometimes. It's kind of gross. I have I've gotten to the point where I want to be around people who are more edifying. And I'm going to give you an example. So maybe some of you know this, maybe some of you don't, but I used to work in comedy. I used to work in entertainment. I was a woke leftist. I worked primarily with comedians who pushed woke ideology. And one of the comedians I worked with is a comedian named Margaret Cho. I don't talk about it a lot for a lot of reasons, but here, let me just say this. A friend of mine who on Facebook, who's a part of Gays Against Groomers, a lesbian woman who's based, and who she and her partner are both in Gays Against Groomers, and she speaks out a lot against woke leftism, and very funny, very smart lady. She shared something the other day. She was like, basically said Margaret Cho is disgusting and she hasn't been funny in years, and of course she's attacking J.K. Rowling and blah blah blah. I didn't know what was going on. I haven't looked at my old client in years. I had no idea. So I looked it up, like what's happening. And apparently she's been doing these TikTok videos where she will attack someone, like different people in the Trump administration, different Republicans or what have you, and also cultural figures like J.K. Rowling. So she had done a video about J.K. Rowling, and I looked at a couple of these videos just to see, are they funny? Like, what's she up to lately? And it's the format of the video is she tells the person to shut up. So she's like, you know, shut up, J.K. Rowling, you're stupid, you're a transphobe, and you hate trans people, blah, blah, blah. And then she will wish something really gross upon them. That's the joke setup of each video. And each of the, at least for the, I watched 2 or 3 of the videos, and what she wishes upon them is something so disgusting. I had to turn the video off. It's not even funny. It's like gross out humor, except it's missing all the humor. It's just gross out. And so I was able to surmise that in the over 10 years, maybe since we've worked together. Yeah, it's been over 10 years. She's just gotten more gross, and at least according to these videos, less funny. And I was thinking about that because I just saw it, and I was reading this chapter on Prudence. And, you know, I know some women who speak that way all the time, where everything, they're not even comedians, and everything they say is about poop or their vagina or some bodily fluid or something disgusting, or their butthole. Like, I hate that word. I just hate, and she said this word in one of the videos, but just like disgusting, body obsessed stuff, like a pig in filth, just returning to that over and over and over again. And I know some women who come up in this modern culture who think that it is sexy or attractive to present themselves as one of the guys, quote unquote, one of the guys. And the way they think that you do that is by speaking in a filthy manner and belching on camera or in mixed company with, or in front of your husband or boyfriend, like belching as if that's funny and cool, or passing gas, or what, all of this just disgusting, crass behavior. First of all, that's not a way to be one of the guys. They're not going to see you as one of the guys for doing that. They're going to see you as a lady who's not ladylike. They're still going to see, they're not going to look at you and say, oh, that's just John over there doing it. No, they're going to say, that's Melinda over there acting gross. Like, that's how men regard that. It is. Ask any guy, I don't care if they're a Christian or a non-Christian or on the left or on the right. It's repulsive. It's not ladylike. It's not becoming. It's not edifying. Is there a place for that in comedy? Yes, I do think there is a place for being crude and gross in comedy. Yes, I do. I'm with comedy, there's different rules that apply. There's humor in some of that. But is it funny to just be in the toilet all the time when there's no punchline and there's no, that's lazy. That's a crutch. It's a crutch. So for women especially, I would say if I were speaking to my younger self, if I were speaking to young women, as I said at the beginning of the video, the messages you're getting from the world and from the culture, a lot of them are lies. And the messages you're getting from feminism and that part of woke, a lot of them are lies. And you want to be prudent in the way that you speak and in the way that you dress. And you want to be prudent when you choose friends to hang around with. And how can you be prudent in the way you speak and the way you dress? Well, prudence means thinking and acting with forethought towards the future, right? And the consequences of your choices. And if you are dressing like a slut, for example, if you are dressing trashy, if you're putting out to the world like I'm worth nothing and I'm cheap and I'm sexually available and cheap to anyone, that's the kind of men you're going to attract. You are an advertisement for that. And I hear a lot of women, I see a lot of young women on TikTok who are always complaining about how they can't find a good man. I can't find a good man. Well, my question would be, what are you advertising? It's not in every case, but in some of these cases of young people, what they are advertising is that they are sexually promiscuous, that are open to one night stands. They're open to being used. I see this on Reddit all the time. Young women who are like, I don't know what went wrong. We went on a date and we had sex and we did, and it's like there's no reason for men to become better men if you are not becoming a better woman. And if you are saying I'm cheap and easy and I'm trash, like that's how people are going to treat you. That is what you're going to attract. And funny enough, I was saying this to one of my friends. Weirdly enough, the world and culture has like tilted so far towards vulgarity and lasciviousness in the way, the lewdness in the way that women dress. It's tilted so far towards lewdness that I have found a lot of men saying that they actually find modesty more attractive, like more stimulating. And I don't just mean attractive in the long term. I mean, they find it sexier. They find it sexier because it leaves more to the imagination. And because they can see the lewdness everywhere, go into a Walmart and see the trashy way people dress and everything hanging out, skin tight clothes. And, my husband is convinced me to watch The Sopranos recently. I had never seen it before, and he was like, he watched Game of Thrones for me, so now I'm watching The Sopranos for him, and it's actually very good. I understand now why it made such a big cultural impact, and I get why he likes it. There's a lot of great things about it, but there's this part where Tony Soprano, who's a terrible father and a terrible husband, by the way. This is not a good example, right? It's not a good prescription for how to be a husband and a father. Well, he has a mistress, like cheating on his wife with lots of women, but he has a mistress, and he tells his mistress at one point to stop wearing all her slutty clothes. Like, he wants her to dress more conservatively. He finds that sexier. And I've heard this from it's not just in pop culture in this TV show, for example. I've heard this from other men. So I say this to young women, like, the point being, that's played out anyway. Like, it's cheap and it's everywhere. And I can promise you, yes, look at Rasmix. Okay, here we go. Here's a dude in the chat. Absolutely. Make us work for something meaningful. There you go. So you want to dress with prudence, which means dressing appropriately for each occasion. Different occasions are going to require different types of outfits. And you want to dress with forethought towards the future, meaning don't advertise something that you don't want. Don't advertise that you're cheap and slutty and then be upset that you can't find a husband for down the road, for the future, to build a life with. That you're only attracting losers. Well, guess why you're attracting them? You also want to speak with prudence, meaning you want to speak with forethought about what you're attracting. And if you're speaking like a toilet and you're filthy all the time, and that's like all you talk about, and you behave in filthy ways, and you're gross, like, then again, why you're not thinking with forethought about what you're attracting for down the road. Like, what you're not thinking with planning for your future. This show that I mentioned is a great example, Love is Blind. These participants are all like dating each other without being able to see each other, like talk to each other behind a wall. And the premise of the show is, can you find true love by taking the physical out of the equation and just connecting each other, verbally, emotionally. And in the show, several of the women just speak with this vulgarity and this lewdness. And then they're like, why couldn't I find a husband in this? Why did I find a playboy instead of marriage material? Maybe it's because you were talking like a common slut. Okay, I've got a couple people to thank. Let me take a break from talking about this subject. I got kind of like I don't know, judgmental. Don't be judgmental. That's crazy. We're all judgmental. Judgment just means discerning between what's good and bad. Anybody who tells you that they're not judgmental, or that you should not be judgmental, they're making a judgment call when they say that. They are passing judgment on you when they say that, because it is human nature. It depends on what you're basing your judgment on. A lot of people who say don't be judgmental, what they really mean is don't base your judgments on the Bible. That's what they mean. Don't base it on the Bible. Base it on worldly things. No, thank you. Okay, Mark, for $10, thank you, Mark. He says, John 5:19 through 20, prayer, scripture, sacraments, and good choice draws us closer to God by his grace. More graceful, more union with God, and the more naturally we do what's right, God's nature, Christ-likeness. Thank you, Mark. This is what I was trying to talk about. And thank you for giving me the scripture. This is, in my experience, and based on what I've heard in sermons and talking with the other Christians, that this is what naturally happens. The longer you are walking with God, like, the more your natural affections shape, like they change. And that's the work of the Holy Spirit in you. That happens. It's not willpower necessarily. It's not you. It's the Holy Spirit working to change what you have greater affection for. So if you are a person who's like, I don't have the willpower to quit drinking, or whatever the thing is, right? Over time, the longer you walk with God, at least in my experience and from what I understand and from what scripture says, God helps you do that. The Holy Spirit helps you do that. He changes your affections, and you're going to start to love God more than you do that thing that has a grip on you. Thank you, Mark, and thank you for the super chat. Legalize adulthood. Oh my goodness. Thank you for the very generous super chat. For $100, it says coming in late. Are making ELUT shaming great again? Wait, I'm slow. Come on. SLUT. Oh, sluts. My video is probably going to be blocked because I said that word. It's probably on the list. It's probably on the list of like bad algorithm. Don't say that word. SLUT, right? Coming in late. Are we making SLUT shaming great again? We should be. Yes, we should be, because and one of the other modern things that the world teaches you that I think is totally wrong and backwards is they say that that all shaming, social shaming, is bad. Okay, which by the way, if we're keeping track, that's a moral judgment. They're making a moral judgment. They say don't do any type of moral shaming because moral shaming is bad. Okay, well, that they just made a moral judgment. They just attempted to shame you, right, for shaming. So the point being, we all do it. It just depends on what do you base your judgment calls on? What do you base your morality on? And one of the lies the modern world tells us is they say that any type of moral shaming is bad. And that's not true. That's not true in every case. Social shaming, some of it is good. It works towards the good. Personally, I think we've gotten to a place where people are afraid to say that certain behaviors are generally on average good for us and some are bad for us. So this whole like feminism part of woke and this whole body positive part of woke, for example, have, in the interest of saying don't be cruel towards women who are sexually promiscuous, or don't be cruel towards women who are overweight or obese. Like, in the interest of saying that, which I agree with, you should not be cruel to people for those things. They go too far, and they say don't speak the truth to them either. They say don't tell them that being a slut's bad for them. Don't tell them that being obese is bad for them. It goes too far. You can speak truth about things that are unhealthy for human beings and not good for human beings without being cruel. And they attempt to prevent any truth speaking by saying it's all cruel, and it's not. I hope I was clear. And thank you for the super chat. Legalize adulthood again says, are we making it for $2? Oh, you were fixing your spelling there. Thank you. Good Grief says glorifying fat is just weird. It is. It's gotten to a place, hasn't it, where what they say their goal is with the body positive movement, or what they used to say was, basically don't be cruel to fat people, which I can get on board with. Of course, you should not be cruel. Everybody's got something they struggle with. For some people, it's overeating or lack of exercise, or it's weight, For me, it's drinking. I have lots of things, but drinking's a easy go-to example in this episode because it's my 6 years of sobriety. But everybody has something they struggle with. And I don't believe in being cruel to people for what they struggle with. But it is cruel to go so far that you don't tell people the truth, or worse, that you lie to them. It is cruel to lie to a whole generation of kids and tell them that being obese is healthy, that it's fine, that it's not going to hurt them. It is cruel to lie to a whole generation of women and tell us that being sexually promiscuous is good for us and it's empowering. It's cruel to lie to a whole generation of women and tell them that abortion is not the killing of a human being, which it is. You can say the truth about it. So that's what I think about those things. Okay. I think I've covered most of what I wanted to cover today when it comes to prudence. I know it was a little bit, I wanted to be a little bit in the Thomas Aquinas stuff, which is interesting, a little bit in my old fashioned, the complete home book, and in the scripture, and then in Nancy Wilson's book, Virtuous. And I think I hit most of the things I wanted to say. Thank you for being patient with me. And even for people who disagree, thank you, because you helped me think through and reason through my arguments. And you also helped me hopefully become better at articulating them. And some of this stuff talking about virtues is new for me. So it really helps me. And I especially want to thank my atheist friends and chatters like Mr. John Bircham in the UK. You're still here. He is he's one of my you're one of my favorite atheists, John Bertram. And you're always giving me heck. I'll say heck. But you helped me to become better, I think, at articulating myself. So he says, I'm celebrating 20 years of quitting drinking. I really must do it someday. Really must do what? I was about to say congratulations on quitting 20 years. 20 years of quitting drinking. I really must do it. Oh, is that a joke? Meaning you haven't actually quit yet? Is that a joke? It went over my head if it was a joke. Pride. Is that what you meant? Pepina says pride is one of the sins I worry about these days. Pride is a big one. Oh, John said it was a joke. Okay. He's been considering it for 20 years. I see. Well, dude, if you're serious and you've been considering quitting drinking for 20 years, just know if you want to quit, it is possible. And if you ever have questions about it, drop them in the comments, or I'm happy to try and help. I like I said at the beginning, if I can quit, I think anyone can, because I didn't think it was possible. I tried for over 10 years. I considered it for over 10 years, right? I want to say something about pride being a sin that you worry about, Pepina. I think it's C.S. Lewis. Is it C.S. Lewis that talked about pride being sort of a gateway to a bunch of other sins? Pride opens the door for a bunch of other vices. I guess you could put it that way. So that is a really big one. And we should, maybe I'll do a whole episode on it, on different virtues and different vices, different sins. If you found this interesting or helpful, leave a comment in the chat. If you have questions, let me know. And I appreciate you guys being here with me today. I will see you on Wednesday. We're going to be doing another Christian panel at 6:00 Central. And I hope to see you guys then. And take care and have a great week. Bye-bye.